All right. So thanks for coming. We've basically got this recap getting started with .NET Aspire that I originally presented for Boston Code Camp back in March. Should be, this .NET Aspire thing is getting a lot of attention and should be a very cool topic going forward. So I won't take too long introducing it yet. Saying I still have my Boston Code Camp thank you slides, so just kind of a little bonus for those sponsors who sponsored Boston Code Camp. Definitely appreciated that they were willing to feed us, and of course my company there, EQ Engineered, I was very psyched to see them step up and contribute to the community. So very cool there. Part of the reason that I appreciated the opportunity to join them. So if you haven't heard what Give Camp is, definitely wanted to throw a little shout out and get this in the recording for for the YouTube video. So Give Camp, New England Give Camp, is part of a large association of national Give Camps that happen regionally. And basically the idea is they get a bunch of nonprofit organizations together and then bring together a bunch of developers and designers and other technical volunteers to contribute to a relatively small but important project for them. And we'll do things like rebuild a website for them, or get a payment processing set up for them, or there'll be other projects here and there, like add a feature or two to a mobile application or something along those lines. And we'll get a few dozen nonprofit organizations and a bunch of developers. And we spend from Friday evening to Sunday evening hammering those out. And it's literally a camp. We've actually had people, pitch tents in the hallways at an office. For the first time ever, this is going to be up in Hooksett, New Hampshire. So it's traditionally been somewhere down near Boston, but this year we decided to kind of shake things up a little bit and try involving folks up in New Hampshire a little bit more. And so we'll have some fun prizes and stuff like that, and an opportunity to meet and work with people, and all that stuff. We're also looking for sponsors. So if your organization is willing to kick in a few $100s or a few $1,000s, nobody would argue, and definitely help defray the costs of a few things. So one of the interesting things about having the event at Southern New Hampshire University is that they will let us spend the night there if we want to. But there's a fee associated because they basically let out the dorms for it. And so if you want to come and spend the night, you'll probably get a dorm. There may be a fee depending on how much sponsorship we get. If we get enough sponsorship, we'll try to defray or reduce, or if we can, zero out the cost of the rooms. I guess it partially depends on how many people we've got wanting to spend the night there as well. So, but Friday night's the kickoff. We'll tend to get our ducks lined up on Friday night and all that stuff. Saturday is the big day when everybody kind of like digs in. We start working relatively early and keep working till as late as anybody feels like it. And then Sunday is kind of the finish up, clean up, deploy, do presentations about your projects and stuff like that, and then we do a final dinner together and head home. So should be a really cool event. I look forward to it every year. It's one of the literally most grueling events that I contribute to myself every year, but it's just such a great cause and such a good time that I can't say no to it. I'm like, I gotta do this. This is too awesome to skip out on. Um, so
So how
that's
do you get
that.
your wife? How do you get your wife to give you permission?
I'm sorry, what's that?
How do you get your wife to give you permission to go to the event?
That can be a challenge, but it's at this point I think she's kind of used to it. So because the really fun part is that immediately following this event is build, and I'm going to be heading out to Seattle for that. So I'm going to be essentially in flight with give camp and build from the 17th through the what 24th, 23rd, 24th, somewhere around there.
So
So that's going to be a very long week. Thankfully, my kids are home from college, so that helps.
uh,
So as far as this particular presentation goes, again, thank you for coming. I know this is what you're mostly here for. The topic of the day is .NET Aspire, and this is basically we'll be talking about what it is, what the features are, why you would want to choose Aspire for development, and then we'll do some demos and play around with it a little bit and see what we can break. Um, because actually it is preview at this point, though I will suggest that if there's any concern about that, don't really hold back. There's no reason to. And I'll show you kind of why. So this is a little bit about me. I'm a Microsoft MVP in developer technologies for the one person who might not know me here, but also for the people on the video who might be watching or recording later. And I work for EQ Engineered, technical consultant and architect. I also help organize a few different users groups and code camps and stuff like Give Camp and that sort of thing. Got a book out there called Faith Hacker, and if you're interested, you can find it at almost any bookstore. So um, at least online ones anyway. So I usually at this point like to ask, who folks are here, what's your experience with C# and .NET, and what makes Aspire interesting to you. If anybody wants to offer a little bit about that, I'll feel free to come off mute, and I'll give that a moment. All right.
I have minimal C# experience. When I did my internship last year at camp, I used C#, and it's. I'm looking forward to hearing about Aspire because I know nothing. This is all new.
Very cool.
welcome to the club. Even I know
Yeah.
nothing about the Aspire. Yeah.
All right. So what is Aspire, right? Basically I kind of get a kick out of how they, basically took the ASP in front of ASP.NET and kind of put it afterwards, and now it's .NET Aspire, and I'm really struggling myself to not call it ASP.NET Aspire because that's not technically its name. It's just .NET Aspire. But Aspire is essentially an opinionated cloud-ready stack. It's sort of glue for building production-ready distributed applications for the enterprise. That means, with built-in observability and discoverability and telemetry and resilience and health checks and all of these things that developers lately, especially in the past few years in particular, have kind of realized, oh geez, every time we spin up a brand new application, we got to kind of add this stuff in. So There have been other similar platforms. The idea is basically that you can spin up an application and feed it into a container or two or three, depending on how you've got the system architected and stuff like that. And Microsoft has even had other similar, vaguely similar frameworks. Dapper is one of the more well-known names. But Dapper, kind of suffered a few different ways. The big thing with Dapper is that it's a little bit of a pain to configure, and so Microsoft decided, all right, well, yeah, we know Dapper's, sort of a competing product. It's our own gig, and we're now making something a little different. I honestly don't know what Microsoft's plans for Dapper are going forward because I've never really used it myself. It's always been sort of on the back burner, and it would be great to see how it goes, but I've never actually built an application with it. This Aspire, however, is really surprisingly easy and relatively low touch to your existing code. So we'll get into that a little bit, but that's basically the idea. There is to containerize, and well, not necessarily to containerize, but to make it easy to containerize and deploy cloud apps, and have it be cross-platform, scalable, high performance, like all of this stuff, sort of built in. The things that, like I say, you used to kind of have to do sort of manually whenever you did a file new project. Now you've got components and capabilities built in, and that makes it a whole lot easier as far as that goes. So installing .NET Aspire is relatively straightforward, and what I usually like to do here is bring up the install kit and show what that looks like. I'll actually show screenshots of that in just a minute here, but rather than switching out of the presentation itself. But there's a couple of pieces to it. So Docker Desktop for containerization. If you want to containerize your applications or take advantage of containerized apps, you definitely need Docker Desktop. You could use WSL2 if you wanted to, but by default, Docker is kind of the de facto, which honestly surprises me a little bit, considering Docker Desktop isn't necessarily a Microsoft product. But I think what they're going for there is a show of faith to the community that they're not just using their own products, and they really are cross-platform and promoting that concept. So in the Visual Studio installer, for the preview edition, understand that right now you can, here it is, early 2024 still, and at this point, Aspire is still a preview feature. You need to, in order to play with it, you need to install Visual Studio 2022 Preview, and it's a feature that you can install from that. So you need to make sure you have the .NET web development workload installed, and as part of that, the .NET Aspire SDK preview option. That I expect will change. I won't say when, but I do expect that will be available and generally available at some point. And that's one reason why I'm saying don't hold back on this. There's more reasons that I'll talk to in a bit here as well. But so also for the .NET command line, I discovered that there were some starter templates that don't actually show up until you run these command lines. So you say .NET workload install Aspire, and then you can do a .NET new Aspire starter using, for example, Redis cache if you want to, and this is how you would actually create a new project using the command line. Don't have to do it through the command line. I'll show you that a little bit later too, but it's just something to sort of get you started if you're using Visual Studio Code. So from that point, you can add your dependencies and then build and run the application. We'll play around with that during the demos here. So this is the Visual Studio 2022 preview installer here. And remember, I was saying you need to install the .NET and ASP.NET and web development. And while you're there, you need to make sure that this .NET Aspire SDK preview is selected. And then as far as the templates, once you've done the command line, you can go ahead and install, you will get the templates that show up in Visual Studio 2022 itself. So it's kind of ironic in the sense that, you install the workload, you install the SDK itself through the Visual Studio installer, but you don't see these templates show up in this create new project window until after you run the command line that says to install the new workload. So just a little hint there. If you want to use these, and we will play with those, you'll have to run that command line. And so once you've installed that command line, once you've installed that feature in Visual Studio, the Solution Explorer, you will see, so this is a little bit hard to see, and I apologize. I did this in dark mode, and it's a little bit overloaded here. Behind this panel here is the Solution Explorer, and what I'm suggesting here is that you right-click a CS project file, and then in the Add menu under that, you can say Add new .NET Aspire component or .NET Aspire orchestration support, and we'll play around a little bit with that. I'll reinforce that a little bit later with the demo. But I just wanted to highlight that here. So let's see here. So the next part, let's talk about what these pieces are, the actual components. So the interesting thing about .NET Aspire is that it doesn't change a bunch of your existing code. It's actually fairly easy to take an existing .NET, either a Blazor application or a .NET MVC API, and add Aspire to it, because the bulk of the code that belongs to it actually lives in other assemblies that you can add and remove at will. So the great part about this is that it's relatively low risk because it's low touch to your existing code. Likewise, if you start to build an application with .NET Aspire, it's not a problem at all to, basically just update your program.cs and remove it if you need to, without touching any other part of your code, or at least not any significant part of your code, if you're doing things correctly. So we'll take a look at that here. But so the purpose of the Aspire app host is basically, it's sort of the crucial component. It is the thing that orchestrates and manages all the different projects and helps configure it, makes all of the pieces aware of each other in the runtime environment. So as it spins up your other pieces and makes sure that they get to talk to each other. And we'll demonstrate that a little bit. It's primarily the interesting thing is when you're using Aspire and you're running in your local environment, it is a separate CS project that lives in your solution And basically you run the app host application. So instead of running, your front end code or your back end code, you run this app host and it is responsible for spinning up the other pieces. Any questions at that point? Because at this point, I'm actually ready to stop with the slides here and start playing with a little bit of code. So I will stop sharing this and start sharing my desktop. And here's a Visual Studio. Whoop, yeah, because I changed displays with different DPI resolutions. But so what I wanted to do was initially show you. Actually, what I really wanted to do first was show you that installer. This is oh, for crying out loud, stop that. Keeps on jumping to my other display. So in here we have the Aspire. I'm just going to filter this out. The Aspire
Hey, Jim, I
templates.
looked at your recording. I'll check it later, okay? I'll check at your recording. I hope you'll post it on YouTube.
Okay. So here's the templates, and as far as the installer goes, I'll just show you the actual installer here so that you can see what that looks like. Again, this is Visual Studio Preview. I'm not going to update this until after this presentation. What I'm going to do is hit Modify here, and you can see when we're modifying this, I have ASP.NET and Web Development selected. And if we expand this node over here out, this is sort of associated with this component. I have .NET Aspire SDK selected as well. So I don't need to change anything. I'm just showing you what you need to do to get Aspire installed so that you can play with it yourself. Likewise, if I bring up a command line, and I want the developer command prompt. So if you're using, I apologize, that was off screen. I hit my start menu and asked for a developer command prompt. But I want to actually say .NET install workload Spire, and I typed it wrong. So that is why I need to look at my slide for what I actually said. Yeah. Pardon me just a moment. It is .NET workload install. So I just had the commands a little bit backwards. So now it's prompting me, is it okay to make changes to my device? And I've already got Aspire installed. If you didn't, this is where it would go ahead and do all this. Oh, look, it's got some updates. So this wasn't good news. I'm updating my system for a demo. Brilliant. That's just asking for demo daemons here, but we'll see how this goes. I apologize if this does trigger some problems, but apparently there have been some updates since the last time I installed this this demo. And good news, we get to try them out. This is almost done. I don't expect this to be too terribly long an install here. Come on. while that's doing its thing, I'm actually going to kill Visual Studio itself, just so that there's no likelihood of a conflict or anything. Looks like I'm getting a pretty complete oil change of components here, so. All right, so that was a better example of the full experience than I anticipated, but good news. So, like I say, I'm hoping that won't impact any of the demos, but we'll continue from there. Oh, I thought I closed that. I'm gonna reload it just in case. So I'm gonna go back into Visual Studio 2022 preview and take a look at creating a new project here. And in theory, I should have same templates that I had before. And what I'm going to do under the circumstances, let me tell you about the different templates. First of all, they've got the .NET Aspire starter application. So this actually has some boilerplate code in it that you can play with and, hack up and, toy with and see how a working example that goes start to finish works. Then they've got the .NET Aspire that doesn't have the starter boilerplate stuff in it. So this is just empty Aspire application for spinning up a new project. It has all the pieces, it just doesn't have any true application code. So the big difference between this template and this template is that the starter application has like the little weather API that you see in the boilerplate ASP API, ASP.NET API applications and stuff like that. But it's all wired up for Aspire as well. So the app host, this is the orchestrator part of the application that we talked about. If you need to add a new app host to an existing application, this is the project that you can add. Service defaults is really just a library that allows you to specify a bunch of stuff that runs in more than one application. And I'll show you that in a little bit. And this is actually a brand new one right here. It even has the little new tag right here. I hadn't seen this before. In fact, this popped in because I did that reinstall. So good news, you get to see that as well. This is a unit test for .NET Aspire that hooks up all of the components as well. So little bit of a touch point on test containers there. If you have not heard about test containers, my colleague from EQ Engineer does a great presentation on them. Test containers are basically about setting up a test environment that runs inside a container. So a very controlled image that you can spin up, deploy your code into, run a bunch of unit tests, get the results, and then destroy the container and not have to worry about keeping it around. The advantage of doing that, of course, is that you kind of, the old joke, the code works on my machine. By using a container instead of your own machine, you sort of go back to the little joke about, oh, it works on your machine. Okay, well, we'll ship your machine. Well, all right. So if it works in a container, well, then you actually can ship the container. So the sort of irony there is that that's the strategy that a container approaches this from, is that you have a known good platform that you can run pretty much anywhere that you can run a container, and you can run your tests, you can run the application in it, and as long as it works there, it works anywhere that you can run that container. So in a sense, it's kind of like shipping your computer. It's a little taste of a virtual machine that runs the application inside it. Any questions there? Hearing none, I will keep going here. So I'm going to go ahead and spin up a new starter application. I'm going to create it in a new folder. I'm just going to call it app3 here because I've done this a couple of times. By default, oh, I can optionally now create a tests project. I'm a little bit dubious about checking that right now, but what the heck? We're in a demo. Let's try it. So this Redis container also, the cool part about that is that it will spin up a container and run Redis cache inside it. So I won't dig in too much on what Redis cache is or what it's for, but it's a very commonly used application component that you can think of it as a memory database for applications. Ultimately, it's super fast and runs in memory without a lot of disk access and makes content available to applications across multiple nodes very quickly and easily. So I'm going to go ahead and spin this up and see how bad it gets, especially with this test containers thing installed. And of course that popped open on another monitor, but hopefully this is relatively visible. I apologize, it's a little bit a tightly packed font here, but what we've got over here in the Solution Explorer, and I keep on telling Microsoft I really want them to make this Solution Explorer zoomable so that we can share it better with people on video calls and stuff. But this particular solution now contains 4 different one, two, three, four, 5 different projects. So they've added the test applications, test components here. That's of course the new piece that we didn't have the last time I did this presentation. I'll take a look at that in a minute. I'll show you for now the API service here. This should look really familiar. For folks using Visual Studio .NET APIs, this is just a minimal API that does the classic little mock weather forecast with a very basic structure and all that stuff. Very simple, not much to it. But if you look at this, there's nothing special. You wouldn't look at this and say, oh, this is an Aspire application. Because there's nothing in this code that's specifically Aspire. You just write your code the way you would always write it. And the way you apply Aspire is really by adding service defaults here. So this, if we right click this and go to the definition, this is where it pulls in all of the application builder features that we want to use in every part of the application. So it passes in the builder in the program and it configures all of these pieces, sets up the HTTP client defaults and all that fun stuff. You can do a bunch more here as well. It configures open telemetry for you so that you've got observability and traceability and all that fun stuff. This is adding telemetry exporters and setting up some health checks, mapping default endpoints so that if you want to change things up, you can change things up here. And all of this gets done in one place, so you don't have to go scanning through the rest of your application and all that to get to it. So that's the, sort of the API service itself. Then we have the app host. The app host is also a very simple project. This is saying, I've got an application and here's my builder for it. it has a cache, and we'll give it the string literal name cache as well, so that the other applications know how to find its configuration. We're going to create a new API service out of the specific API service that we've got. And we're going to create a new web front end out of the Blazor application that this spun up as part of its template. And we're going to, in the web front end, we're going to pass in the cache and the API service. So the front end now gets access to the cache and the API service just by virtue of this application spinning up those instances and passing them into the web front end project. And it's pretty cool as far as that goes. We've got, your basic settings, and the development settings here are very standard and straightforward. Notice that we don't have anything in particular about the caching. That just automatically gets wired up by virtue of what we saw in the program.cs for this project. So in addition to that, we have a very simple Blazor application with a weather API, and we also have the unit tests. Now, I'm really going to tempt the demo demons here. I want to run these tests because I've never seen this template before. So I told it to kick off, and now it's building. And it's discovering the tests. And of course, because this is the first time we've done this, it might take a moment or so, but it should be very quick once you've built it before and downloaded all the dependencies and all that stuff. Whoop, we blew up. So there's the demo demons. Oh, that's my bad, actually. That's funny. So remember I said Docker was required. I forgot to start Docker. So on another screen right now, I've opened my start menu and I am launching Docker Desktop. And as soon as that becomes visible, I will show you what that looks like. So of course, that is Docker Desktop right here. So now, I'm just out of curiosity, I'm going to go ahead and try running these unit tests again. Now that we've got Docker Desktop up, and I'm going to bring Docker Desktop back because I have a feeling we'll see it do some stuff here. Yeah, look at that. It spun up a container. And now it should be able to pass all those unit tests. Very cool. Okay, so it's really actually, I say all those unit tests. It's really just one unit test here. But the good news is that it spun up a container, it ran the code in it, and it passed the unit tests, which is pretty darn cool, considering this is just a sample application. I haven't really done anything special with it. Any questions at this point? All right, I'll keep rolling. So I'm going to move this off the screen now that we're kind of done with it. And for giggles, I'm going to go ahead and change. So right now, the app host is the core application. I'm going to go ahead and run that. This is the startup application. And what this is doing is this is spinning up in a screen here, console here. And it's also spun up another container after having run all that. And check this out. This is actually that app host running here as its own web application. You can see that this web application knows that there are 3 independently running processes that are related to this application, and it knows about all 3 of them, and it's aware of their health. and it tells you how to get to each of them. So we can, for example, from here, let me zoom in a little bit so you can read this a little better, though I don't want to lose so much of this that you can't see this stuff, for example. I'm going to click on this and say, open this in a new tab. And there it is, actually. If you're familiar with the .NET API, this is just a really simple, basic boilerplate example that Microsoft bakes into their standard example code. And you can see it's running just fine. This is producing a JSON result exactly as expected. Now let's take a look at the web front end for this. So here we are. This is the web front end for this application. And it, if you're familiar with Blazor applications, is a very simple standard hello world Blazor application with the classic little click me feature. And then they've added this weather tab over here. So I'm going to go ahead and click the weather tab. And if you notice, this is the same data that we saw in JSON just a moment ago, updated by randomness and just showing results. And it says, it's actually kind of funny. It says it's 6 degrees Fahrenheit and the summary is it's scorching. I guess if you live on, like Mars, that might be true. But that's not a great description of 15 below in Celsius even. But anyway, that's just a little quirk of the random generation of the forecast application. But otherwise, you can see this is just a standard Blazor application. So the real magic of what Aspire is doing is it's exposing this container here that allows us to do things like take a look at the resources in the application. We can actually look at the console for what's going on behind the scenes, see events going on in real time as we're running it. So we can also see structured logging here. We can look at trace logs, and this is, notice, for the API service or the front end. So we can choose one or the other or all. So a consolidated trace log across your entire distributed application right here. Then we can also look at metrics. So we can look at metrics for the API service. We can see how many active requests there are. And of course, right now there are none. How long does it take to process a request? And the most recent request, there was only one, took all of 250 milliseconds. And the initial request took all of 25 milliseconds. So it's blazing fast as far as that goes. Look at all these different metrics that this thing collects by default here if we scan through this. Same thing with the web front end. We have a little bit more activity going on here. I clicked a bunch of stuff and played around with it. But the requests are all nice and zippy, and we have good metrics on that. Any questions about this? All right. So I mean, this basically, the interesting part about this is, if you think of a lot of people remember like Windows Forms and .NET, ASP.NET Forms and stuff like that. And if you think about it, those were really high impact application frameworks. So when you built an ASP.NET Forms application, you could look at the code and tell that it was a .NET Forms application, and that was because it was using all of that code in particular. This is one of the interesting things about Aspire is it's not so much a framework as it is a platform runtime. And so the impact to your running code is very minimal. You can't look immediately at most of your code and tell that it's running as Aspire code. So like I say, it's relatively low impact to add or remove this. It's, fairly straightforward. Oh, see, and again, I just killed the application and it tore the container that it was running in down automatically for me. So I didn't have to do anything to get rid of that resource. In a lot of cases, that's not necessarily true. There may be some of these resources kicking around behind the scenes. So if you're familiar with Docker, you might recognize some of these, but there's no specific volumes kicking around here that I need to get rid of. So it cleans up very nicely. It doesn't leave a lot of junk kicking around after you've run your application, which is pretty awesome. So again, among the other things, I think I tried to show this during my demo slides, but you can right click, in the Solution Explorer, you can right click a project and you can say add, and then you can say .NET Aspire package. Now I'm going to go ahead and try that right now and show you what that looks like. Now, strangely enough, you might notice this is the NuGet interface. So why is the .NET Aspire saying, let's look at NuGet packages when you say add a new component? And even more fun, why are there no packages here? So really what it is these are all NuGet packages with a specific set of tags on it. So it's tagged as a component and its owner is Aspire. But other than that, they are NuGet packages. Now, because Aspire is in preview, we have to check this include pre-release. And then you can see all of the different NuGet components that are available for Aspire. And there's all kinds of cool stuff. Oracle Entity Framework Core and MongoDB drivers and Entity Framework Core for SQL Server, Key Vault, RabbitMQ client, Redis Exchange, all of these different things that you can plug and play with. And it will allow you to run this stuff locally. So very cool stuff as far as all that goes. Any questions there? All right. So the other thing that you can do from here when you say add, and the other thing, the Aspire, actually they fixed that. That's interesting. So you can say add Aspire package here, but notice you can't add an Aspire orchestrator because this is an Aspire orchestrator. So you don't necessarily want to orchestrate your orchestrator. So I'm going to go back to the API code here and look at the add on it and notice that you've got the Aspire orchestrator support. What this is doing is this will allow you to create a new package. So this is really for a case where you have an existing project and you want to add Aspire to it. So that's what that's for. Any other questions at that point? All right, so I think what I want to try to do, and then we're going to wrap this up relatively quickly here, but I want to see if we can deploy this in Azure here. So let me bring up a web page and log in first here. And I am going to, whoops, here's my resource groups. And I think I'm showing all of them here. Yeah. I'm going to create a new demo resource group. try publishing this to Azure. And I'm going to try publishing it to container apps for Aspire in this MVP subscription. And we're going to put it in East US 2. I always love to use East US 2 because I figure the East US 1 is older. And, you know, whenever it comes to computers, you know, newer is better. But anyway, I'm going to call that the .NET Devs environment here. And we're going to kick this off and see how it goes. Right. Specify a container point with service binding. Publish creation failed. So something got messed up here. I'm going to try changing this to develop. Okay, now it's trying again. I think part of the reason may have been a problem. Let's see, might have to find out. This might be a demo daemon from having pulled down that update. Under ideal circumstances, this would have published up a version of the application up to Azure, and it would have looked like something like this. So, you know, basically I've already done this and deployed, and up here in Azure, it creates, you know, when the deploy is working correctly, it will create all of these resources for you and populate them appropriately according to your configuration and wire them up and even secure them. So, for example, the API service that it spins up for us will be on its own virtual private network that only the web front end can access. So if we go and take a look at the web front end, and I believe I've still got this running, we can launch this. This is the same, you know, basic application that we've got. I played with it a little bit, and we can go here. If I click the weather, this is actually hitting the API. And so basically, this is hitting the web service that's deployed to Azure. Generally speaking, like I say, it should be just as simple as hitting publish and selecting the resources, you know, telling it a little bit about where you want it to live. And it should spin up all of those resources and deploy your application into them and configure it all up and secure it and make it do what this is doing. So like I say, I'll at some point publish a little bit somewhere about what went wrong with that demo. But you can see this is how it should look. And it's exactly what the same as what we had published in our local system when we were developing and debugging. When we were running locally, it was all running locally on our machine. We could stop and hit breakpoints and test it and all that fun stuff. In Azure, it works essentially the same. Of course, it's deployed and secured, so it's a little bit trickier to debug. It doesn't mean you can't, but it's a few more steps. Any questions before I wrap this up? All right, so like I say, I will find out what happened with that demo daemon and post something about it in the follow-up with the video. And I'll post the video on YouTube at some point relatively soon. But In the meantime, I do believe, see here, we share this, that, we reshare slides because I had them open in PowerPoint itself, but okay, let me run back down to where I was. So we did that demo, and that was basically it. The idea, of course, ASP, excuse me, I still want to call it ASP.NET. .NET Aspire is a powerful tool set. It's very low touch, like I say, very low impact to your existing code, easy to throw in there, easy to test and experiment with. So if you're at all curious about it and want to try it with your existing code, spin up a branch of your code base, throw it in there, throw an orchestrator in there and toy with it and see how it goes. Should be actually, that would make for an interesting blog post if any of you have an opportunity to do that. In the meantime, it's it won't hurt to do it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend publishing a pre-release framework yet, but something tells me it probably won't be too terribly long before this is available. I can't say for sure when, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was before the end of the year, maybe sooner. So keep an eye out for that. And any other questions before we wrap it up? All right, I won't complain, but thank you all for coming out. Again, as far as other events and stuff like that goes, be aware that Microsoft Build is on its way. That is at the end of May. And again, Give Camp, keep an eye out for that. If you can spare the time, we would love to have you be a part of it. You don't have to physically be in person. You can participate remotely, though that gets a little bit tricky. We're happy to have you. It's always more fun to be there because there's food and fun stuff like that. But anyway, as far as other events go, I think we're kind of wrapping up the event season for the springtime. So most of the other events like Boston Code Camp already happened, and I think SQL Saturday already happened, and there's been some AI events and stuff like that have already happened. So the next kind of big thing to keep an eye out for in this space, especially, is Microsoft Build. So I'm really psyched. I just booked travel to go to it myself. I got selected to be, somehow I convinced somebody that I'm an expert, and they're letting me staff a table or two on behalf of Microsoft as an MVP at Build. So I'm psyched that I get the opportunity to go again. So
congratulations.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything that they want to bring up to the group, or? All right. Well, I guess with that, I again really appreciate you coming, and I will wrap this up and let you know when it's posted online. And thanks again for coming.
All right.
Thank you
Thanks
very
for
much,
doing
Jim.
this.
Thank you.
Good night.